Few had ever heard of Midland City, Alabama, a peaceful southern town, population 2,300, a town that relies on its faith. And no one here ever dreamed that faith would be tested after what happened on an ordinary school bus at the end of an ordinary school day. It would set off a 6-day siege of terror. It all began when bus driver Chuck Poland, 66 years old, known for calling the school children his kids, brought the bus to a halt, flagged down by Jimmy Lee Dykes, who lived along the bus route. Dykes would immediately make demands. He wanted 2 of the children on that bus. And sitting up front in his favorite seat, a 5-year-old named Ethan.
Tell me where Ethan was sitting, and did he usually have a name tag on his seat?
He had a name tag up here where it said Ethan.
Terica Singletary was on the bus with Ethan. She showed us where she was sitting in the back. She could hear those terrifying demands up front.
You said he kept threatening. And what was he saying?
He said, I'll harm y'all. I don't care. I just want 2 kids. It sounded like he was finna really kill us. I was like,
she showed us how she and the other children crouched behind their seats, her fingers to her ears, afraid gunshots were coming. And as the driver tried to throw the bus in reverse, he was shot several times. He was dead, and the gunman grabbed the first child he could get to, little Ethan.
The child is on the line with us. At this time, advising that the bus driver's been shot.
Just had a bus driver shot, possibly deceased.
Suspect has removed the child from the bus.
The children watched as Dykes pulled Ethan away, and they knew they had to get themselves off that bus, back through that front door, walking past the bus driver, Mr. Poland, who was slumped in his seat. And by then, Ethan was gone. The shooter, Jimmy Lee Dykes, had taken him onto his property and down through a hatch into a bunker he'd made himself. 2020 obtaining this video from the neighbor across the street, the first moments after police arrived. The entire neighborhood under lockdown, and Rhonda Wilbur, who lives across from Dykes, got a frantic text from her husband and son, who were still at home.
The text said, "Mean man finally did it. He shot the bus driver."
So people who lived all around here call him Mean Man.
Yes.
We're hearing bus driver dead, 1 kid hostage.
Right.
And by then, Ethan was down in the bunker.
The Mean Man, as they all called him, Jimmy Lee Dykes, was a man neighbors had grown to fear. A decorated Navy veteran, he'd grown suspicious of the government. He was known for his rants, and he was always carrying a gun.
He usually had by him at least a rifle and a shovel.
You thought for years he was a ticking time bomb.
Yes. I don't think that there's a single person on the road that he didn't threaten to kill at one point or another.
He threatened to kill you?
Yes. He threatened to kill us all, yes.
Now he was underground, in that primitive bunker, just 6 by 8 feet, with Ethan, who we would all soon learn is autistic. Not only was his mother terrified for his safety, she was terrified how he might react, held underground by a stranger. You believe he had planned to take a child into that bunker?
Yes, 100%. He had a very specific plan. He was very methodical, very detailed, and through our communications with the negotiators, he was very proud of his plan.
That plan was just now playing out. The only way into that bunker, a trap door at the top. SWAT teams and negotiators began the careful task of trying to get Ethan out. Their only way to communicate at first, through a ventilation pipe into the bunker.
At this time, we have no reason to believe that the child has been harmed. Pray. Pray.
They could hear Dykes, and they could hear Ethan too, his crying.
Could you hear Ethan upset?
You could hear him upset and stuff.
Crying?
Yes.
And for Ethan's mother, anguish. She could not hold her Ethan, the boy who loved to be hugged.
How do you tell a mother that it's going to be okay when her boy is in that bunker?
She asked me this question. She said, "Pastor, what have I done wrong?"
Ethan's older brother Cameron never leaving their mother's side, speaking to 2020 for the first time.
One of the hardest things for your family was not being able to hug him, because Ethan loves to be hugged, right?
That's correct. And it was very hard not to be able to physically touch him and hug him and, you know, really be there for him.
The shooter.
Negotiators could also hear something else, a TV on in the bunker. They knew there was another way to reach Dykes.
The country was watching when you came out and you said, "Thank you for taking care of our child."
I want to thank him for taking care of our child.
You were talking to him.
Yes. I was talking directly to him.
So you knew exactly what you were doing in saying that.
Yes, sir.
You were trying to keep him calm.
Yes, sir.
They were also trying to keep Ethan calm, convincing Dykes to allow them to drop in his medicine, his coloring books, a toy car, a toy dinosaur, even Cheez-Its crackers. And how would they get those items in? Not through the pipe, but through the hatch at the top of the bunker. They were told to leave them there and ordered to get away.
And he would reach out and grab the stuff.
And they would listen for Ethan's reaction to the toys.
Those were the only moments of joy.
Yeah.
But the clock was running and the hours had turned into days. The team frantically looking for more ways to watch Dykes, convincing him to allow a cell phone in. There was overhead surveillance, and somehow they had sneaked a camera into the bunker too. The FBI won't say how they got it in or how much they could actually see.
You could hear what was going on in the bunker.
I can just tell you we had a really good idea of what was going on inside the bunker.
And because they knew what was unfolding in that bunker, it allowed the team to send text messages to Ethan's mother, his family, and those messages were enough to keep them going.
And we did know when, at times, he was asleep. And that was normally around 9 o'clock at night.
So they would at least be able to tell you he's gone to bed for the night?
Yes. We normally get a text or something that he had fallen asleep.
Was that at least some comfort?
That was actually a lot of comfort where I could actually go lay my head down.
Dykes was demanding a reporter and a camera be sent in so that he could send out a message. But his motive still unclear. Authorities knew that option would not work, and they were at work at a makeshift bunker, practicing not far from the real bunker where Ethan was being held.
You know that if you rush anything, you do anything the wrong way, his life is in danger.
As the days wore on, nearly a week now in that bunker, Dykes was deteriorating, suddenly so fast they feared he would spiral out of control.
How close do you think his mother was to losing Ethan?
I thought he was going to die. We all thought he was going to die.
He made it clear he was going to harm Ethan?
He made it very clear that he was going to execute his plan, and that was the day.
When we come back, what suddenly frightened those agents enough to act? And what did they do to trick the gunman? Plus the first images of Ethan after his rescue. Dawn was breaking on the 6th day of the standoff. Ethan just 2 days from his 6th birthday. And his mother, his family, an entire town, unsure if they'd ever be able to throw Ethan that birthday party he'd so hoped for. Behind the scenes, FBI agent Steve Richardson was growing increasingly worried too. As he monitored that bunker, he could see, he could hear Jimmy Lee Dykes growing increasingly agitated. He was holding a gun, and he was bragging about his unfolding plan. The time for negotiating was suddenly over.
What did you hear that told you you had to get the boy out?
Our negotiators, our behavioral analysis personnel were all telling me the subject's not going to come out. It's not going to get any better. It's getting worse.
He made it clear he was going to harm Ethan?
He made it very clear that he was going to execute his plan, and that was the day. I thought the child was in imminent danger.
It was his call to make, and at 3:12 in the afternoon, nearly 6 days to the hour after Ethan was dragged off that bus, and a small elite team that had been practicing in that makeshift bunker was moving in. They told Dykes what they had told him before, that they were there to drop off more of Ethan's medicine. But they were waiting at that small hatch. When Dykes approached it, they set off 2 flash grenades to distract him, to blow the hatch open. A gunfight ensued, Dykes firing at the team. They fired back, and then silence. For everyone listening at the command center, their most worrisome moment.
I cannot tell you how long it seemed from the time of the breach till the entry.
Then, one of the agents radioed in.
The best words I've heard were, "The child's crying. The child is crying."
You knew he was okay.
He was crying. He was breathing. I knew that was good news.
And for Ethan's mother, who'd been relying on every text message sent from that team, this time she would get a phone call, and Ethan's older brother Cameron was right there.
You were there when she got the call?
We were all there when they told us.
What did they say?
They said, we have Ethan.
And down below, an alarming find. 2 bombs authorities believe were part of the plan. One in the bunker, the other in that ventilation pipe. And they've discovered writings left behind by Dykes that the FBI told us might one day shed light on his motive. Meantime, the town, Ethan's family, moving forward with plans for that 6th birthday party. And tonight, an ABC News exclusive, the first images of Ethan after the rescue. The family told us they hoped we would show America that Ethan's smile has returned. Ethan is playing again, the family telling us he hasn't spoken of the bunker or of that man. Instead, focusing on his new toy cars and finally celebrating that birthday at the town church. His only other trip, they tell us, to Toys R Us. And from his family tonight, a message for the team that saved their little boy.
Thank you for bringing the boy back. I mean, my brother, he's something else. He's a bundle of joy. And I would tell him thank you every day I could, because they gave us him back.
And there is someone else Ethan's family would like to thank, the bus driver, Chuck Poland, who gave his own life to protect the other children on that bus. The town pastor and his wife, their own grandchildren on the bus.
The kids on that school bus, they loved their bus driver.
I loved him and I didn't even know him.
And it turns out that that bus driver was not only kind to the school children, he'd been kind even to Jimmy Lee Dykes. The FBI telling us tonight that the bus driver and his wife in recent months had befriended the loner, known to everyone else in the town as Mean Man. They were worried that he was alone.
As a matter of fact, the bus driver may have been one of the only friends that the subject had. And he entered the bus, demanded children, and shot his friend to death.
Tonight, a town remembering Mr. Poland, and a town still praying for little Ethan, praying that those smiles have returned for good. His mother saying she can't describe how incredible it is to hold him again, her sweet boy. Finally, a family able to hug the boy who loves to be tucked in at night.
How many times have you hugged him?
I've lost count.
What would you like to say to the town?
Thank you. Thank you all.
A simple thank you, now that Ethan is home.
Next, a madman took her too. But this story has a twist. The terrifying call she made.
Oh no, here he comes. I got no call.
Trapped in a custom-made dungeon for 17 days.
How did you survive the ordeal?
That's the most bizarre part of all. Coming up. 2020 Saved continues, now with Paula Ferris.
Before there was Ethan, there was Katie Beers, a poster child synonymous with kidnapping and captivity. 20 years ago, she was saved, and only now is telling her story. By all appearances, she's living a normal life. Close family, 2 beautiful children, but the road here has been a torture journey.
Is it difficult for you to talk about?
Talking about the specifics of the abuse is where it gets difficult.
Good evening. Katie Beers is missing, 9 years old.
Katie Beers became national news back in December 1992, just 2 days before her 10th birthday. Katie was living with her godmother, Linda Ingalari, at the time.
I won't be able to sleep. I can't get her off my mind.
On that day, a family friend named John Esposito, known in the Long Island neighborhood as Big John, picked her up from her house and took her to buy a birthday present.
So I figured, let's go to Toys R Us, I'll buy you a birthday present.
According to Big John, he bought Katie a video game, then took her to this arcade. When she went to buy tokens, he claimed she simply vanished.
She was walking towards the machine.
Worry turns to panic.
Get in touch with me any way you can.
Katie's godmother gets a message on her answering machine.
It turns out to be Katie, and she's sobbing. Click. That's all we had, and that results in Linda and Larry calling 911.
Detective Lieutenant Dominic Varone and his kidnap investigation team have plenty of questions for John Esposito, the last man to see Katie.
He said something dirty happened to her.
That telltale remark instantly transforms Big John from a sobbing friend into the prime suspect. Turns out Big John has a big rap sheet. Years earlier, he pled guilty to grabbing a 7-year-old boy from a shopping mall. The cops raid his home, but instead of finding Katie, they discover a messy bachelor pad. Police set up a temporary command post on the property.
But he was very nervous about it and insisted that we remove our equipment and our detectives.
That seemed suspicious.
Oh, it did, but we had no choice but to oblige.
But all the while, Katie was close, very close. In fact, just a few feet below where the cops were standing. No wonder they couldn't locate her. Just like Jimmy Lee Dykes, Esposito had built an elaborate dungeon for his prey, ingeniously concealed. First, there was a bookshelf in Big John's office that had to be unscrewed and rolled out, revealing a closet. Under the carpet and under the linoleum, a 250-pound concrete trap door. And deep in that darkness below, the custom bunker Big John had built for Katie.
He told me to go ahead and go down, and I told him no, that I didn't want to. So then he threw me down.
And it was dark.
It was very dark.
Complete darkness?
Yes.
On her hands and knees, Katie crawled into this cold, musty compartment. Virtually the only light from this television perched above her makeshift soundproof coffin.
There were times that I thought that I could hear people upstairs. I would scream on the top of my lungs, "Help me, I'm down here."
And nobody heard.
No.
I'm not gonna hurt you, Susie.
It's a scene right out of the movie The Lovely Bones, where a child is snatched by a neighbor and hidden in an underground dungeon, just like Katie. But Katie says she was uniquely prepared for this ordeal. Why? Because unbeknownst to the police and social services, Katie had already been living a hellish life of abuse at the hands of her godmother's husband, Sal.
I was sexually abused, physically abused, emotionally abused, verbally abused.
As twisted as it sounds, Katie believes it was her horrific home life which prepared her the hard way to survive John Esposito's dungeon.
I was so used to abuse that it didn't really have that much of an effect on me.
How did you survive the ordeal?
I did have to remove myself from the situation that I was in. I had to think happy thoughts.
You didn't sleep at all?
Not very much, no.
Why?
John wanted to take a picture of me laying on the floor looking like I was dead. And he wanted to then send it to the cops so that if they were looking for me,
you wondered if you saw this young girl around?
That they would stop. And when I refused to do it, he said, okay, we'll get it done another time.
For now, all the family can do is wait and worry.
In the tomb, Katie watched TV reports about herself and was determined to stay alive. Chained around the neck, she began manipulating her captor, forcing him to confront the future.
When I asked him how I would go to school, he told me that he would teach me what I needed to know. When I asked him how I would work, he would tell me that he had enough money for the two of us. When I asked him about getting married and having kids, he told me that when I was 18, he would marry me and have children with me.
So in some sick, demented way, he saw a future with you?
Yes.
Katie's strategy works.
Katie, how are you feeling?
After 17 days of intense round-the-clock surveillance, Esposito cracks and turns himself in, leading Lieutenant Varone down to the Chamber of Horrors, just steps from where the police had been searching for her.
She was just yards away. Did you feel duped at all?
Yeah, we did somewhat, but when everyone saw how she was secreted and the efforts that he took, they understood it.
Verone was afraid of what he might find.
You'd expect to find a child after spending 17 days in an underground chamber, trembling, scared, cowering, withdrawn, and instead we find this upbeat young girl talking about things like her pet dog.
Esposito pled guilty to kidnapping, and Katie was placed in a new home with loving foster parents. Step by halting step, she started to piece together the childhood she never had. Against the odds, Katie attained something resembling normalcy. She went to high school, joined the cheerleading squad, and went on to college. Today, after 6 years of marriage and the dungeon 2 decades behind her, Katie has written her story in this book, Buried Memories.
My life is exactly what I had always wanted. 2 parents who love me, and a husband and 2 kids, and a wonderful family. I'm tearing up.
For Katie, the kidnapping of little Ethan in Alabama brings back childhood memories she wants to forget.
Hopefully he's able to recover in such a way as I did, by being able to remember what I needed to, and then burying it when I didn't need those memories.
Next, you got what, where? From a tree branch through her neck.
Now I'm gonna die.
To an engagement ring in her stomach.
Holy smokes, what did I just do?
You never know what will show up when the x-rays reveal what's inside. Even Buzz Lightyear and Barbie.
Fortunately, every rescue we read about isn't as dire as the ones we just saw. Sometimes they're just plain bizarre. So the next time someone says it's all in their heads, they could mean it, literally. And Chris Conley has the x-rays to prove it.
Fears, shears, even a shoe. Forget what's on your mind, what's in it. The people captured on these x-rays all live to tell their tales. Not that all these people might want to. Digitally enhanced to be more visible. These real x-rays come from the book Stuck Up. Co-author Dr. Murdoch Knight is an ER physician who's seen his share of the surreal.
While I've certainly seen plenty, I think there's far more to see.
These images go from showing simple kitchen utensils to infinity and beyond.
We have seen quite a few figurines. In just the book itself, we have a Barbie, we have Buzz Lightyear.
Laugh all you want, but inserted or ingested, the risks can be real.
Sometimes an object can be so high risk that it needs to be retrieved sooner rather than later.
High risk or high reward? Just ask this couple, Reed and Caitlin Harris from Farmington, New Mexico.
I just remember Reed coming into town and all the girls were in love with him because he's a good-looking guy.
A first date on New Year's Eve led to a kiss as 2009 began, and courtship. When it was time to propose, Reed bought a ring, took Caitlin and their college buds to a Wendy's for their customary after-class treat, and as a surprise, dropped the ring into Caitlin's Frosty for her to find.
But the plan went south.
In more ways than one.
A friend of ours decided to speed things up by challenging Caitlin to the Frosty eating race, whoever could get to the bottom of their cup fastest.
I won the race, and we get to the end of the Frosty, and everybody just has weird looks on their face.
Oh my God.
Just like, holy smokes, what did I just do? Did I give somebody else her Frosty? I think we even have it on video. I said, I think you swallowed your ring.
You swallowed your ring.
Like, what ring?
I said, your engagement ring.
A visit with ER doctors confirmed just who was ward of the ring.
They said the only way to get it out is for it to just pass through. So we stock up on everything with fiber in it to get things moving along.
And in all the excitement, Reed had forgotten to do something important.
I had the x-ray in hand and I got down on one knee and proposed to her that way.
So with an x-ray and an empty ring box, the happy couple immortalized their union. How many days was it before you had the ring back in your possession?
So we proposed Tuesday night and the ring appeared Thursday morning.
The ring was put on her finger, where it remains today. But unexpected bodily encounters with unlikely objects aren't all fun and games. They can turn a carefree outing into a life-and-death horror. For Michelle and Daniel Childers of Camia, Idaho, Labor Day morning 2009 was perfect for a drive along the river. Roadsides abundant with overgrown late summer pines, tree branches scraping their pickup. As depicted in this reenactment for the Discovery Fit and Health Network, inside their truck, the couple shared conversation, laughter, and music.
And the next thing I knew, it was just over and like everything just stopped.
A branch, perhaps bent back by the windshield, had whipped inside their pickup and suddenly snapped off with horrific consequences.
I asked Daniel, I said, "Where is it?" And he said, "It's in your neck."
Her husband was the first to see the gruesome result. Michelle had been impaled through the neck by a spruce branch covered with needles. Amazingly, she could breathe and speak, but for how much longer?
I didn't think we'd make it out of the road before she'd pass away.
What did you see in his eyes as he looked at you?
Terror, like out of a horror movie or something. And I screamed, and then he screamed, and his scream was intense. And then it dawned on me that there was no going back. That's not a movie, and now I'm gonna die.
What kept you from wanting to pull that branch out?
I'm a logger. It's just common sense. You don't want to pull it out.
I think that what really kept me from wanting to jerk it out was I wasn't in pain. I just figured it would hurt if I tried to pull it out.
Good to know. Otherwise, Michelle might have bled to death in minutes. By helicopter, Michelle was taken to Missoula, Montana's St. Patrick's Hospital, where waiting to treat her was this experienced surgeon.
Her husband was very wise not to just yank that out. She would have had 2 minutes of bleeding, and that would have been it.
Is there some moment when you confront this for the first time when at least part of you goes, holy crap?
Yeah, or maybe other words, yeah. I saw what looked like a small Christmas tree protruding from the front part of her neck. It penetrated probably 8 to 9 inches to the very back of the neck.
Dr. Peter von Dorsten ordered CT scans that showed vividly the full extent of her injury and how narrowly it missed hitting her windpipe and carotid artery. Surgical tools usually intended for bones were put to use on wood.
I felt that this was an excellent saw for getting through that tree branch, just to amputate it at the level of the neck so that I could eventually slide it out.
Hours later, he was done. What was left was truly remarkable.
And I thought that she was going to really have a bad scar, and you can't even hardly notice that there was a 2-inch stick out of her neck.
If it had been a couple of centimeters to the right or a couple of centimeters to the left,
To the right would have been devastating. I don't think she would have lived. She was incredibly lucky.
Michelle went home from the hospital just 2 days afterwards. 14 months later, she returned to give birth to their first child, a baby girl named Palin.
It was a lot more exciting, a lot happier of a visit.
What did it feel like to see her face for the first time?
It was so much emotion. Like, I lived because she was meant to be.
Next, a helicopter in free fall breaking in two. A tiny car covered with 12 tons of steeple. How could anyone escape these disasters alive?
This was going to be my last minute on Earth.
But it wasn't.
Oh, wow.
The secrets to being indestructible. We continue with 2020 and Saved. Here now, Matt Gutman.
It could happen at any moment. You might pass out and collapse onto the subway tracks. Or the Camaro you're driving could wind up like this, airborne. And you might well think, this is it. Curtains. They're all over the internet. This man should have been hit by that bus. Last month, this high school wrestler was pinned by a giant light fixture. And can you imagine this? A twister lifts a 12-ton church steeple about the size of a Mack truck into the sky and slams it on Michael Williams' car.
I was prepared, mind, body, and soul to see somebody that was deceased.
But he wasn't.
I lifted my head up and asked them to please get me out. The head had been split open down to my skull. My sternum had been broken in half. My back had been broken, but I couldn't breathe. So I just laid my head down and started taking short breaths.
That's got to be a miracle that this guy's alive.
I want to thank y'all for saving my life.
But here and all these other incidents we've just shown you, nobody died. They're miraculous moments that kick death right in the teeth, transform the survivors' lives forever.
I should be dead. I shouldn't be here right now.
Hard-charging helicopter reporter Andrew Torres loved to thunder over New York, chasing the big stories from the sky.
Reporting live in Chopper 4, I'm Andrew Torres. Back to you in the studio.
I mean, talk about a bird's eye view. You see everything that happens.
That never got old. To be looking down on the Empire State Building is an amazing thing.
This day was sunny and clear. Andrew and his pilot, Russ Mowry, were heading out to cover a shooting in Brooklyn.
We pinpointed the scene, saw the police cars and the ambulance and the tape. They wanted me to get right on the air with it.
One person was shot in this area a short time ago.
Just moments before going live with his second report, without warning, the helicopter starts spinning out of control.
What was your immediate reaction once you realized that the pilot basically had lost control of the helicopter?
Panic, terror. This was going to be my last minute on Earth. We went into a nosedive, which was terrifying. And then the pilot was able to pull us level, and I thought we were going to be all right.
He thought wrong.
We started to lose more altitude, and we went completely out of control again.
All the while, his colleagues in the other helicopters watch, breathless.
I thought that I might die that day.
Andrew's chopper crashes through a chimney, breaks in half, and completes a full flip. Typically chatty reporters in those other choppers now go silent as they watch in horror.
We have some breaking news to tell you about. A helicopter from a rival television station has crashed. Shannon, what do you know?
I'm sorry, Bill. You'll have to excuse me if I'm a little shaken up. This helicopter came down in the last few minutes.
Is anyone alive down there, first of all?
We do not know severity of injuries at this point.
Then this tiny figure emerges with barely a scratch.
When I walk out of there, my shirt is still straight. It's straighter than it is now.
We took Andrew back to the Brooklyn building where his chopper crashed.
Oh, wow. We came through there and then did that tumble, cleared that alley down below, and landed, I guess, right here.
But you walked out without a single broken bone.
That's incredible.
A miracle mixed in with some fortunate physics. Hitting the chimney and breaking in two absorbed energy and actually reduced the speed of the helicopter, saving Andrew and the pilot's life. Andrew no longer flies, and he knows that every moment is precious.
I don't care if people get impatient behind me that I'm not doing 20 miles over the speed limit. I have to be careful, because you just never know. To think how close I came to not experiencing the joy of getting married and having my own family. That's why I don't take anything for granted anymore.
Next, it's a blizzard out there. What to do if you find yourself taking the plunge.
Call 911.
Stormageddon, the blizzard of the century, whatever you're calling it tonight, it means a lot of snow and ice across much of the country. The Northeast getting hit hard this evening. So tonight here, the real-life dramatic rescues on the ice and how to keep it from happening to your family. Here's Jay Shadler.
Beware, the Iceman cometh and taketh away.
Call 911 right now.
At least that's what happened recently when a sledder broke through a frozen lake in Wrightwood, California. Within 5 minutes, a dozen would-be rescuers slip, slide, and sink into the frigid water.
And when the people started going through the ice, it was just total panicky stuff. It was just total chaos and out of control.
This frosty chain reaction is a classic example of what not to do in a situation like this. But listen.
Give me the rope from under the seat. Now.
That's the key. When you're already on thin ice, literally, a rope or a line is the safest way to attempt a rescue.
Throw the rope out. Lasso.
Remarkably, this near disaster had a buoyant ending. All were saved to sled again. Maybe it's the cold that freezes out common sense.
Just the other day we were out there practicing, there was a lady pushing her baby in a carriage out on the ice, and we had to ask the police to get off the ice.
2 young men lucky to be alive tonight.
But just this week in Central Park, 2 more people fell through the ice. They survived, but first responders were their last resort.
Once you make contact with the victim, you're just going to kind of manage this onto him. And now the guy's on the shore. They're going to pull him out first.
Manhattan firefighters will rescue you in a New York minute, but until they arrive...
Stay near the edge of the ice. Try not to touch the ice with your hands. If you got your car keys in your pocket, try to use those, a belt buckle, anything sharp to get yourself out in the ice. And once you do, spread your body weight out as much as possible.
But out in Minnesota, on Lake Minnetonka, 14 vehicles have already crashed through the ice, despite warning signs everywhere.
It's very frustrating for us. We feel like we've done a tremendous job in trying to get this message out.
Last weekend, a 31-year-old man and his 87-year-old grandmother drowned here.
The ice is not safe this year.
And just last night in Ohio, a rescue turned tragic when a Good Samaritan rushed onto the ice to save a 5-year-old boy who had broken through. Clutching the boy in his arms, the 30-year-old rescuer carries the boy to safety, but the hero did not survive.
Most of the the people that end up going to assist in a rescue end up needing assistance themselves.
With blizzard conditions already crippling parts of the East Coast, rescuers say regardless of the emergency you're in, odds of survival are always better if you can fight the instinct to panic. On the other hand, if something like this should ever happen near you, the largest glacier break ever recorded from the documentary Chasing Ice, feel free to be terrified.
That's our program for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Elizabeth Vargas.
And I'm David Muir. I'll see you here this weekend, and for all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, have a good evening. And if you're dealing with a storm, stay safe.